Welcome to College Launch. I am Mary Roberts, and I am passionate about transition, especially the transition that students make when they move from home to college. Today, we have Karen Arnold with us. She is a faculty member in higher education at Boston College, and before that, she was a vice president for students at Reed College, and she got her BA at Oberlin College. Today, we're going to talk about successful first-year behaviors, ways that entering college students can have a good year. So Karen, what are some of the important ways that college is different from high school?
I think that students sometimes don't understand how different the experience will be once they're at college. And I'm assuming here a student who's full-time and living at the campus and has recently graduated from high school, because actually quite a few of our students are now adults and many are commuters. So some of this advice carries over. All of it's relevant to the 18-year-old recent high school graduate who's going off to college. So the first thing is that your mother and father are no longer there with you, and you need to structure your time and to make your own schedule, to make sure you get enough sleep, to figure out who you're going to spend time with, how you're going to spend your time. So that whole managing yourself, structuring your own life, making a lot of decisions that had been made for you by your high school teachers, by your parents, by living in your family, all of a sudden it's all on you. Academically, things are very different also. The first thing that happens is you're actually not in class that much. You might be in class, depending on your major, between 10 and 15 hours a week, maybe 20 if you're doing a lot of lab sciences. And it's important not to make the mistake that you think that that's all you have to do, because the expectation in college is that you put in 3 hours of independent work, preparation for the course, and assignments and studying for tests and other studying for every hour of class time. So if you have a class that's typically 3 credits, they expect you to be putting in 9 hours of your own work outside of class. We can talk more about that, because doing that actually is more an ideal and observed in the breach mostly by college students. But you're in deep trouble if you think that all that time not in class is free time. And then I would say the last huge difference is the array of choices that you have. Choice is good, choice is overwhelming. You have choices about what kinds of activities you want to do, what kind of organizations you want to get into, what kind of classes you want. All of a sudden, you've been on this path for your whole life where you had relatively few choices. You have many choices. You need to exercise those choices, and that can be difficult, but it's certainly very different from high school.
I can remember when I was in college having that feeling of unstructured time, and what do? I'm happy that I went off to the library and studied. But I can remember returning from a class, and the student who was living below me played a song by Sly and the Family Stone, and that was kind of a timekeeper for me. You know, there are funny ways that we remember our free time. Well, what can make a difference in student success in college? What are some of those behaviors?
This is a place we're very fortunate because there's a lot of research. People have been doing research on why students succeed, why they're satisfied with college, why they drop out, why they aspire to and go to graduate school. So we know a lot. And some patterns have come out in the last 60 years of research that are really important. So one thing that makes a difference, the big thing is getting integrated socially and academically. To the extent that you are either isolated or feel like you don't belong, you're incongruous, those are signs of not remaining at your college, not being successful. You might transfer to another one, but you want to integrate academically and socially. So what does that mean exactly? It means that you communicate with the people around you, you make friends, you don't spend your entire time on Facebook with your high school friends or texting them. So first thing you have to do is separate from your old life. Doesn't mean you're not going to keep in touch, but to the extent that you really need to commit to your new place and step off that comforting bridge, that's really important.
It reminds me when we took our daughter to college and then came down a month later for Parents' Weekend. She took one of her friends, a friend that she had made, to lunch with us. And this young woman sat there with her phone in her lap texting her boyfriend the entire time. And she did end up transferring after 3 semesters.
Well, I never thought of this metaphor before, but it is kind of like a little kid with the Linus security blanket. And there's nothing wrong with having something of a security blanket and having someone who's there for you for emotional support. But the ritual is that you break up with that high school boyfriend at Thanksgiving.
That's what happened. It took a little longer, but it did happen.
And even if you continue with that boyfriend or girlfriend, it's really important that you understand that that person has to have a supporting role in your life, like your mom and dad, but isn't present in your life to the extent that that person should displace your making new friends. And it takes guts to get off your phone and your Facebook and interact personally with people around you. What makes that easier is that everybody's looking for new friends at that point, and everybody's risking a little interpersonally to reach out. It's a good thing that you have a roommate. So that's one thing. You need to really separate from your old associations. Integrating socially not only means making friends, it also means getting involved. And if there's one gigantic finding that puts together a lot of the research on positive college effects, it's that the more you are engaged, actively involved in the college experience, the more you will succeed, the more you will be satisfied, the more you will get out of it. So what's involvement? Alexander Aston at the University of California in Los Angeles is the big guru of involvement and engagement. And he says it has 2 parts, physical and psychological. The physical part is just your time. How are you spending your time? Are you partying a lot? Are you studying a lot? Are you doing physical exercise a lot? And outcomes, not surprisingly, are related to how you spend your time. But the other part, psychological, is how invested you are. So you could spend 3 hours studying, but if you're staring at the pages of a textbook or trying to do that while texting your friends and listening to loud music and talking to somebody, then it doesn't matter that you've got the time invested. So that combination of physical and psychological involvement is the most important thing. And that gets us right back to the opening question of you need to structure your time. So how are you going to do that? And I'm here to tell you that the way you do that, the choices you make, are going to affect how satisfied and successful you are. So those are 2 things that lead to success. The last thing is, and this relates to academic integration, is making contact with the adults on campus. And again, there are a couple of different categories here. The most important is faculty. Next to satisfaction with peer relations, the number one predictor of someone finishing, graduating from college, and aspiring to graduate school is having a personal connection with a faculty member. Informal communication outside of class. Someone who knows them, knows their name, takes time to get to know their interests. So how do you get that? Sometimes it happens naturally, particularly at your smallish liberal arts colleges. Even there, it doesn't always happen naturally. You have a responsibility for reaching out. And this phenomenon that is non-existent, I think, in most high schools, called office hours. Every faculty person at every college has posted somewhere, I guarantee it, a list of times of the day and certain days where they will be in their office for the sole purpose of entertaining whoever shows up. And so going to see your professor at office hours is a great way to begin to make some personal relationships. Using your advisor. There's one study that found that a major predictor of students dropping out during or after the first year was not knowing the name of their academic advisor. You will be assigned an advisor. That advisor will almost certainly not be chasing you around to make sure you come visit him or her. It's up to you to go to that person and to take advantage of that person's expertise, but also it's that person's job to look at you as a whole person, not just what classes you're going to take, but what you think you want to major in, the fact that you just broke up with your boyfriend and you're miserable, the fact that you're not quite sure whether you ought to join this club or that organization, or you're good enough really to aspire to this intramural league. The advisor's there for all of that. Tuitions are really high, and part of the reason is all these services are provided. Right. So not only are these services going to help you succeed, you're losing out if you don't use them, and you're paying for them. Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say is there are all these support service offices. There's tutoring, there's the financial aid office, there are offices for students with learning disabilities, there are physical wellness centers, there are women's and gender centers. There are all sorts of professionals around campus who have services for you, and you should use them.
Well, going back to making contact with professors, sometimes, at least in this case, it took a little nudge from a parent, and I was the parent. It was my daughter's second semester at college, and she called and she said, I want to drop Spanish. It's too hard. I can't do it. And we encouraged her to go to her professor, and she said, it's impossible, I can't do it. And so I remember a phone conversation, just promise me you don't have to think about whether or not you can pass this class or manage the Spanish. Just promise me you'll go to class, and after class you will walk up to the professor and say, I need some help. That's all you have to do. And it turned out it became one of her favorite classes, and she got a very good grade at the end.
Yeah, there are two really important things in what you just said there. Number one, go to class. Not only are you structuring your own time, class attendance at college is not mandatory. You will be in deep trouble if you don't go to class. So don't get in the habit of oversleeping your 8 a.m. class or thinking you'll just catch up later. Really, the best thing, treat your academics as your job, your full-time job. It'll take about that many hours a week, could take more, and go to class. That's what you're there for. But the second thing, as you said, you think you're all alone, you're drowning, the worse things are, the more you're likely to avoid your professor. That's exactly the time you need to go forward and contact that person. There are also other people. So I'm a former dean of students, and I entered that Reed College as Associate Dean of Students. And students would come talk to me. And one of the things they would say is, I think I need to drop X course and I'm having trouble. And I would say, well, have you talked to your professor? No, my professor seems so intimidating, or I don't want to feel, I don't want him to know that I'm not as bright as I want him to think I am, or whatever. And so I would coach them to go see their professor. They could come see me too. And if you are a college student or a parent of a college student, remember the deans. They're the one who, oh my gosh, you know, I've had a family emergency and I need to miss a week and a half of classes. Don't just disappear.
Right.
Or I'm having trouble in 3 of my classes. But in anything that has to do with classes, number one connection is your professor. And I want to say one other piece of advice that I heard once given at an orientation talk by a physics professor. I'd never thought about it, and it was brilliant. He said, if you fall behind in a class, don't go back and try to catch up. Start where the class is and go forward. If you have any more time, go back. But don't start behind them, then you will never catch up. And implicit in this little discussion is that procrastination has sunk many a first-year student. So the idea of managing your own time is really important. And if you're going to make mistakes, you're going to feel overwhelmed, you're going to feel moments of not belonging. All of us feel those things. Share them with others, acknowledge them with yourself, and reach out for help, and I assure you it's there.
And Karen, it reminds me of what students have said when I've asked them, what is the one piece of advice you have for entering college students? And many of them have said, just remember that everybody is the same. Everybody is new at this. Everyone is not sure how to do it. Everyone feels overwhelmed. Don't look over there and think that they have it all together. Everyone is the same.
But the flip part is this is an opportunity to reinvent yourself apart from all those labels that have been stuck all over you by your family and upbringing. You're the responsible one, you're the creative one, you're the one who is lazy, or whatever it is. Those labels, you're here, this is the coolest time of life where you can say, well, what do I accept of those ways that I've been defined by others? How do I want to be defined? And I do have a story about that. I had a first-year student once, and we were in a seminar, and I stopped the content at one point and said, so how's the transition going? And he says, it's kind of rough. And I said, why? And he said, nobody here knows I'm cool. And so clearly he was having this big identity crisis of everybody in high school knew who he was, so that's who he was. And was he cool if nobody knew it? What does it mean to be cool? Does he want to be cool? He was at a starting point. Other people are much more excited by the fact that they can leave behind certain things. They even all start saying, don't call me Timmy anymore. My name is Tim. Or dye their hair red, or whatever they want to do.
Right, or no preppy clothes. I'm going to be bohemian now.
You're allowed to experiment. You're allowed to try different groups. This is a wonderful time of life in terms of that. What you'll miss out on is that opportunity if you protect yourself and don't be vulnerable enough to try these things.
Right. In the book I wrote, Create Your Space, Create Your Life, Set Yourself Up for Success at College, I talk about 3 stages of transition. And the first one I call Let Go. And it's letting go of all those routines and identities, as you say, have been placed upon you, to be free, as you say again, to explore the smorgasbord of opportunities they encounter.
So I always start my college student course, which is for master students, with the following exercise. I say, think back to the time as an undergraduate that something happened or you did something, experienced something that really made a dent on who you became as a person, changed you as a person. And then I tell everybody, and listen carefully to these introductions, because you're now going to write a theory, you're going to write a paper for next week, an informal theory of what really makes a difference in human development. And what an incredible way to get to know people quickly. Interestingly, relatively few of the stories have anything to do with the classroom, and relatively few of them have anything to do with times that someone was utterly comfortable and happy and doing the same old thing. They almost all have to do with situations in which people are outside of their comfort zone, experiencing something that stretches them and makes them see themselves in a new way.
Yes.
Like my student who was studying abroad, and she fell asleep on a train somewhere, I think she was in Germany or Austria, and she woke up and everything she had been stolen, including her passport. This was pre-cell phone, although that might have been stolen too. And she woke up and said, I need to figure this out myself. There's nobody to help me. And she did. And she said, of all the wonderful things that happened to me studying abroad, it was that disaster and the confidence and competence that I felt myself have in dealing with it that really changed me as a person.
Yeah, everything has to be stripped away.
Or, in a possibly less dramatic, lots of people talk about doing service learning, which I highly recommend. Not just volunteering in a community of need, but combining that with academic study and reflection. And over I would hear, I learned so much about myself by really encountering people who were very different than I. You can do that in community service. You can do that by meeting someone who's very different than you. I'll tell a little story about that. In my own first year,